everybody. Welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering people through storytelling and education. Today, we are going to learn about surrogacy and egg donors. Two things that I'm not going to lie, I have thought about doing in my life. I remember thinking, hey, maybe I want to donate my eggs. And then I felt like I don't think I could handle just like potentially having a child out there that I didn't know existed, is one thing. And then I've always thought that I could be a surrogate, but a few things that I've heard, and then especially after my interview today, we are interviewing Parham, and he's a fertility expert. He's the founder of the Egg Donor and Surrogacy Institute, and he just has a wealth of knowledge. But after my interview with him today, I really just learned that I couldn't do it. I do not have what it takes to be a surrogate, at least not right now at this point in my life. There's so much that goes into it legally. There's so much that is behind the scenes. It's not just like, hey, we're going to hire this person to have our baby. It's such a detailed process, and I couldn't do it. I have to be honest. So kudos to the people who do. And we're going to talk about that too in this podcast. So a lot to learn. If you're listening, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. Leave us a review. Let us know what you're loving about it. DM me. Let me know who you want to have on, what guests, what topics you want us to cover. And again, make sure that you're subscribed so you're staying up to date on everything, all the changes that are going to be coming to the podcast. And so that you can just continue to be a part of the community. I love hearing from you guys. When you guys message me and tell me, hey, like I heard this episode and it changed my life, or I just want to say thank you for everything that you do. I've been listening, for a while now, and I've learned so much. Those are the things that really fuel me doing this. I feel like sometimes I do feel a little burnt out, just between my job at the hospital and being a mom and being in this season of not sleeping well with Jovi, and then doing the podcast and making time for interviews and guests and all of that. I feel like I definitely feel the burnout sometimes, but that's what keeps me going. You guys are what keeps me going. I want to keep getting information out for you. I want to keep making content for you. It's for me too. I'm learning every single time we have these episodes. So it's good for me too. I feel like it's a little bit of a social life that I get outside of motherhood. This next week, we're going to be also having a bonus episode. July is Bereaved Parents Month, and I bring on a guest who talks about her journey of infertility and then miscarriages. And I share some stuff that's been happening in my life, and it's just a really great episode. We get to connect. I've actually known her for almost 20 years, but I haven't talked to her in forever. But I was just so grateful for her to come on and to share her story with us. So make sure you look out for that bonus episode this week. All right, we're going to go ahead and dive into the interview with Parham. All right, everyone, I have Parham here, and I'm super excited to talk to him because he is an egg donor and surrogacy expert and fertility, and he founded the Egg Donors and Surrogacy Institute, and I haven't really dove into those topics too much on here. And so I'm super excited to learn from him and to kind of see how he started this and why and what he's doing. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I'm very excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So what made you decide to get into this field and to come up with the Egg Donor and Surrogacy Institute?
Well, I think, I started Egg Donor and Surrogacy Institute about 20 years ago. So it's quite a while. And believe me, a lot has changed in the world of egg donation and surrogacy since then. Anyone who knows me knows that I really cherish family, children. So it is only natural for me to be in this world. I always talk about the fact that I've had over 1,500 babies. Mm-hmm. And really every single one that's born, I feel like they're like my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet you develop, that relationship with these couples, because I feel like childbirth is it can be just such an intimate thing in trying to expand your family. And you have to develop a relationship with your doctor in order to get to that point.
It's the amazing thing about what we do is everybody who's involved in this process, when you look at the doctors, us as the agency, the parents, the surrogate, the egg donor, the lawyers, the psychologists, everybody who is involved in the process, we're all working towards the same goal, which is creating the miracle of life. So everybody is in it together. And there is a sense that, like everything else, there are highs and there are lows, but at least we are going through those emotions together. And it is when we have success, it's everybody shares in that. And when we mourn, everybody mourns together. So that is really the amazing thing about what we do. Of course, it's to be able to be professional and at the same time share those emotions. For example, on a given day, we might have a confirmation of a pregnancy, a surrogate who's pregnant, and it's amazing. But at the same day, we might have a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. So it is going through all those emotions on the same day, at the same time, elated for one family and mourning with the other. It's a very interesting field.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into fertility? Were you like an IVF doctor or something like that before?
No, I'm a lawyer by training.
Okay.
One of my good friends is actually a fertility specialist, and it was through him that I was introduced into the world of surrogacy and egg donation. He had asked me if I would like to do the contracts between the intended parents and the surrogate or the egg donor. Of course, when you go back 20 years ago, this was a completely unknown field. I told him I'll look into it. And the more I really dived into the world of surrogacy and egg donation, I really fell in love with the field. And it was just a natural fit for me. And what a blessing it's been to be able to create so many families.
Yeah, I can imagine. We're going to take a break from this episode so I can tell you about a partnership that I'm really excited about, and that is with Genexa. They are making sense with their clean medicine that will actually help you feel better. The thing that I love about them is that they make clean medicine made with the active ingredient that you need, but without the artificial ones. I've actually been using the kids' pain and fever medicine for Jovi's teething, and it makes me feel so good knowing that she's getting what she needs to help with the pain, but not the artificial dyes, parabens, or common allergens and preservatives and sweeteners that are in other over-the-counter medicines. It's really cool. Genexa was founded by two dads that were on a mission to make clean medicines, and they wanted to just change the way that we take care of our families. They have a huge network of healthcare professionals across the U.S. helping patients and their families join the clean medicine revolution. I actually used their antacids. I had a really bad stomach ache last week. And it was nice because I have taken other ones before, but I knew that there was stuff in there that I didn't really like. So I felt good and confident taking their products, knowing that it had what needed in it to settle my stomach, but didn't have the artificial stuff in it that I try to keep out of all the other things that I buy, right? All the snacks and other things that I get, I try to avoid all of that stuff as well. So it's real medicine just made clean. So you can start cleaning out your medicine cabinet today. Go to genexa.com/mamas for 20% off your first purchase. That's genexa.com/mamas for 20% off your first purchase. That's Genexa, GENEXA.com/mamas. So would you say that people who come to your institute, is it just a wide variety of people? Because you hear so many stories now of couples struggling with maybe infertility, or just not being able to have kids, and just kind of trying to find different options. So what type of people usually come to your institute?
Well, first of all, the statistics show that 1 in 8 women couples, when you look at a heterosexual couple, 1 in 8 struggle with infertility. When you look at worldwide, it's 1 in 6. And quite a few of those, probably about 50% of individuals or couples that are struggling with infertility will ultimately need the help of an egg donor or a surrogate in order to form their family. If you add to that also same-sex couples, who by definition are going to need some sort of a donor, either a sperm donor, an egg donor, and a surrogate to carry the pregnancy for them. So the number is quite high of individuals or couples that need the help of an egg donor or a surrogate in order to form their family.
Mm-hmm. I had a couple on last year who they had a sperm donor and had their baby. Which, I mean, it's amazing the different options that are out there these days for people to be able to have their families because, I mean, 100 years ago, who knows?
Of course, when you look at even 50 years ago, we didn't have all the options and how incredible it is that we live in this day and age. It takes a lot for especially a woman to mourn her own fertility. Mm-hmm. To realize that she needs the help of another person in order to complete her family, whether it's an egg donor or a surrogate. But to be actually living in this day and age where we have those options and those opportunities, it is tremendous. So as much as going through infertility is very emotional, very taxing, the fact that we have options now makes it just that much easier.
Mm-hmm. So what is the process, I guess, of becoming an egg donor for anybody listening who might be interested or might say, hey, like I would love to help a family out. What does that process look like? And in the beginning, you mentioned like lawyers and psychologists. Do like egg donors have to go through all of that process as well?
Of course. At the core of it, if you really think about it, you're using the genetic material of the egg donor. So, we want to make sure that the egg donor is physically healthy. We do a lot of screening as far as her genetic background. The American Society of Reproductive Medicine has certain guidelines for who can be an egg donor. They have to be within certain age limit. They have to have a certain body mass index. Of course, healthy. They do drug screening and all the other, medical panels to make sure that the donor is healthy. Also, they look at the family history of the donor, parents, grandparents, siblings, and they will rule out a donor from becoming a donor if she has certain genetic abnormalities or certain cancers or other things that run within her family. If at least 2 immediate family members have the same type of disease, then she would be ruled out as a donor. So it's a very comprehensive screening process. Of course, psychological screening is also very important because you want to make sure that the donor really is emotionally, psychologically ready for this journey that she's embarking on, and that she understands, that her family understands what she's doing and they're supportive of what she's doing, because it would be a disaster if, for example, she is not sharing what she's doing with her family and in the middle of a cycle, they find out and they try to dissuade her from going through the donation. And for the intended parents, that would be quite a disaster. So there is a lot of screening, a lot of conversations, a lot of different professional eyes that are placed on the egg donor as far as the physicians, our agency, the lawyers, the psychologists, to make sure that a donor is suitable for becoming a donor.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that makes, obviously, the intended parents feel much more comfortable that you guys have such an intensive screening process, so they know that the eggs they're getting come from somebody who's healthy and of sound mind. I'm sure that it could probably be nerve-wracking if you didn't have that information.
Absolutely. This is why I think it's absolutely important for intended parents to be working with a reputable, good agency. And really the best advice that I can give parents is build the best team around yourself, really the best doctor, the best agency, the best lawyers, the best psychologist, because you're then hedging all the bets in your favor. And you know that at least, we never know what happens within science. We don't know whether pregnancy will happen. We can't guarantee a lot of things, but at least when you know that everybody around you is doing their job, their part professionally, that's all you can hope for. And then you go into the journey that you want to go into to create your family.
Mm-hmm. What about for surrogacy? Because I remember hearing before, and I'm not sure if it's correct, so you'll have to tell me, that in order to be a surrogate, you have to be done having children of your own.
You must have had children of your own and be raising the children of your own. The issue of whether they're done with their own family is a personal one. Really, right. Some physicians might want that, but we have had surrogates who maybe after, they must have had their own child, obviously, but once they go through a surrogacy journey, they might decide to have another child of their own, and they might do surrogacy again. But for a surrogate to qualify to become a surrogate, she must have her own child and must be raising her own child.
Mm-hmm. We are going to take a quick break from this episode to talk about BetterHelp. You guys know that I absolutely love partnering with them because I'm a big fan of taking control of your mental health. So if there is something that is interfering with your day-to-day life, whether you are dealing with depression, stress, anxiety, motherhood that can be so tough, I feel like there's so many things that come up for us, grief, sleeping, trauma, you will find a great counselor on BetterHelp. Anything that you share is always confidential. And one thing that I love about them is that they are convenient, they're professional and affordable. You get to communicate in a way that makes sense for you, whether you want to FaceTime, email, text, however you feel comfortable. And there's no awkward sitting in an office waiting to get called in to talk to somebody, which is my favorite part. And the service is available for clients worldwide. And in fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. And as a listener, you get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/mamas. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mamas. In the surrogacy process, because you're implanting, is it the embryo at that
Yes.
point that you're implanting into them? So it's already kind of the sperm and the egg have been put together like in a petri dish. I don't know how
Correct.
it works.
It's called in vitro IVF or in
Right.
vitro fertilization.
Yeah. So it's already like a tiny embryo and it's implanted. So that, one thing that you hear a lot with surrogacy is like, aren't you going to get attached to the baby? What happens in that type of situation? And my friend who's a surrogate who came on the podcast before said she just knew from the beginning, like it wasn't hers. She's like, it's not my baby. It felt very different. She was happy to grow this child for the other people. But I feel like that's kind of like a big fear of people going into it. Is that like what a lot of intended parents, is that like one of their normal fears that they come to you with is, what if our surrogate runs away with our baby?
That is a very common question that we get. And of course, I jokingly respond to them. Can you imagine a surrogate who's sitting in front of me and she's asking me, how do I know that the parents are going to actually come and take the baby? Mm-hmm. So, as much as these are serious questions and serious concerns, the fact is there is a reason why we have all of the screening in place. 1 out of every 100 applicants that we receive for women who want to become surrogates ultimately are admitted into our program to become a surrogate. That's because all of these concerns, all of these matters, all of these issues are weighed extremely heavily, and we want to make sure that we have a surrogate who has had her own child. The egg source. So what we do now mostly in the United States is gestational surrogacy, which means that the egg source is not that of the surrogate herself. So she doesn't have a genetic link to the baby.
Right.
We're either using the egg source as the intended mother's or an egg donor. So the embryo doesn't have a genetic link to the surrogate. That's number one. Number two, emotionally, psychologically, this is the reason why we want to make sure that they've had their own child, raising their own child. And also they understand that there is no genetic link. So it's, for the most part, the women who become surrogates, really the way they describe it is, it's like extreme babysitting.
Right. Yeah, they have to deal with all the pregnancy stuff, which cannot be fun.
It takes a very, very special human being. I think 99% of human beings on Earth cannot do what the surrogates do. And it takes a very special type of human being to be able to do what they do. Some of the questions that we always get is, number one is the issue of attachment, which it doesn't happen. The second thing is it about the money? They always ask us if the surrogate is doing it for the money. And I have to assure them that if it were the money factor is important. The compensation really helps the surrogate in some way in her family, in whatever it is, education, buying a home, or whatever it is. But I assure you, if the financial were the primary reason why she would want to become a surrogate, there are much, much easier ways for her to earn that compensation than to become a surrogate. So if money is the motivating driving factor, they will not become ultimately a surrogate, because once they find out what they have to go through medically, all the shots, all of the time commitment, it is a very emotionally, taxing procedure and journey. So there are much easier ways for women to be compensated, and they would not be a surrogate if it was just because of the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about in surrogacy, when they're going to deliver the baby? Do the intended parents have a say in how she's going to birth?
Yes and no, of course. I mean, it is 100% because it's the intended parent's pregnancy, really, and it's their journey. One thing that we want everybody to understand from the beginning is any decision that has to be made about the fetus, about the baby, about the pregnancy, specific to the child, those decisions are the intended parent's decision. If there is any decision that has to be made about the health of the surrogate, then it's the surrogate and her partner's decision. Of course, none of these decisions that we talk about are made in a vacuum. They're always made because a situation comes up and the parties get a recommendation from a doctor. So a lot of it really has to do with the physician and what the physician recommends. So the parents, for example, the surrogate might want vaginal birth. The parent might want a vaginal birth. But if there is a danger to the baby and the doctor ultimately decides that there has to be a C-section, well, then there has to be a C-section, because nobody is going to override the decision of the physician at that time. So, of course, a lot of the decisions belong to the intended parents. Some belong to the surrogate, but ultimately it's also a medical procedure, and we have to make sure that we listen to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Do a lot of the people who come to your institute birth out of the same hospital or practice, or is it kind of spread out?
It's spread out because we have surrogates in many states, of course, surrogate-friendly states. By the way, it's important to note that not all states have surrogate-friendly laws. So surrogacy is not necessarily legal everywhere, and they also have different types of laws that deal with surrogacy. So it matters where the surrogate lives, not where the intended parents live. So the surrogacy laws apply to where the surrogate is. And of course, the fertility clinic can be anywhere in any state. The surrogate will ultimately give birth where she is, and we want to make sure that she's giving birth at a major hospital that has a tertiary neonatal intensive care unit. So God forbid if something happens during the delivery, that they don't have to deliver the baby and move the baby to another hospital. And also the hospital has to be within no more than 30 miles or a half-hour drive from the surrogate's home, because we obtain a pre-birth judgment before the birth of the baby, where the court signs a judgment instructing the hospital where the surrogate will give birth to place, once the baby is born, to place the intended parent's name on the birth certificate rather than the surrogate's. So for those reasons, we have to make sure that the surrogate is giving birth at the hospital where they have a copy of this pre-birth judgment, and they know and they're expecting the intended parents and the surrogate, and they understand what this process is. So the surrogates will give birth really where they are. Having done this for 20 years, we kind of know where all the good hospitals are, and we work with the same hospitals over and over again, obviously, but they could be anywhere that the surrogate is.
Mm-hmm. How did that work with everything during the pandemic? Because I'm sure a lot of times the intended parents want to be there for the birth of their child. But during the pandemic, some things were so limited. What were some of the obstacles that people faced?
Well, we had many challenges during COVID because the majority of our intended parents, for example, were actually out of the United States. So they were international intended parents who were here and who had a surrogate that was carrying a pregnancy for them. So last year, and this is why it was really indicative of why it is important for intended parents to be working with a reputable agency that has the bandwidth to deal with circumstances that you can't even imagine. For example, last year, who would have imagined that COVID would cause so much issues? The intended parents could not be here. They were not allowed into the country for the birth of their child. Meanwhile, the surrogate would go into labor and deliver a baby while the intended parents couldn't be here. Of course, for the parents who were local and who were, able to be there for the birth, at least at the beginning of COVID, they were not even allowed in the hospital at the time. So there were a lot of challenges that we had during COVID. Things are easing up now a little bit. There are different, hospitals have different guidelines, whether they allow one person in or they don't allow anybody in. But we always try to find solutions for the parents where they feel supported and they know that we're there to figure things out with them. That is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did that work with, I guess, parents who were overseas and then a child was born here and then who cared for the child until they were able to get over here?
So there were really two avenues that we were trying to figure out. One was, before COVID, we would never, ever consider the surrogate really having much contact with the baby once the baby is born because of emotional attachment issues. Well, with COVID, everything kind of turns upside down and inside out. And so the thought became, if the surrogate had the emotional and family support and also the family logistical capability to take care of the child. Some surrogates really took care of the baby for a couple of months until the parents were able to be here and be united with their baby, which was really, honestly, it wasn't my preference. We did set up, for example, apartments. We became the guardians of the child. We would take custody of the child, and we would have professional nannies that would really take care of the child. We would get apartments and put cameras everywhere so that the parents could really see their baby 24/7, also communicate with a professional nanny. We would go visit them, make sure that the baby is safe, secure, is being fed, is being touched, is being loved, until the parents could be united with them. So there was a lot of challenges that we had, but we met them.
Yeah. Yeah, this last year was so crazy with all of that.
And it still hasn't ended. We still have surrogates that are giving birth where the parents still cannot be here. So we're still trying to figure out how to just make sure that the baby remains safe until they can get here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so hard. So you had said before, I mean, you kind of deal with a wide variety of people coming in, and it's the Egg Donor and Surrogacy Institute. Do you have anything to do with sperm donors as well, or no?
We don't directly, but indirectly, we always have had to arrange, not through our agency, but through other, partner agencies to procure sperm for some intended parents as well. Mm-hmm. But our focus is egg donation and surrogacy.
Mm-hmm. I guess you kind of always think that that the donation part's pretty easy. I mean, for men, it's a lot easier. I don't know if like the screening process, I'm sure obviously they screen these men for health and all of that for the sperm, but they don't actually have to take hormones or injections or anything like that. Whereas with the egg donation, you do, correct?
Absolutely. Everything is so easier for men.
I know.
They send a man into a room and with some magazines or movies, and they say, come back with a specimen. And it's easy. For the egg donor, it does require shots. It requires a semi-invasive procedure, pretty much like a kind of like a pap smear, where they're actually going in and removing the eggs from her body. So it's a mini surgery. They are usually under anesthesia when they do this. So it's a lot more involved than just for a man who donates sperm.
Right. The guys, they're like, hey, just go masturbate in a cup. And the women have to like go have surgery.
Yes. And also the man's part ends in a pleasure.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. And the egg donor, obviously having gone through this process, like any medical procedure, there are risks of complications. The most common is if the donor hyperstimulates, which means, her body goes into a hyperstimulated state. So she will be bloated, very uncomfortable. Under rare circumstances, she might have to go to the emergency room to drain some of the fluid, but it doesn't happen that often. But there is still risk. So for women who donate eggs, it's a lot more involved process. And that's why we have to make sure that anyone who wants to become an egg donor, they understand all of these ramifications, risks, and what they are actually doing. It is not it's much more complicated than how a man donates sperm.
Right. Much more complicated. So what would you say is your favorite part of all of this?
My favorite part is oh my God, there are so many. The first is, I think, the moment that we do a match meeting between the intended parents and the surrogate. And when you sense that moment of spark where, people really fall in love. So on one hand, we have the intended mother or intended parents who are sitting and they're talking about their challenges, their emotions, what have they been through, the struggles that they've had with fertility, and then looking into someone's eye and asking for that help to help them have their child. And on the other hand, you see the surrogate who is really giving everything of herself, of her body, of her emotions, everything, putting everything, heart and soul into it, and really looking into the parents' eyes and saying, I got this. I'll help you. I'll help you have a child. I've had a good pregnancy or pregnancies, and I'm here for you. And that moment when you really feel like people connect and they fall in love, for me, that's the most incredible and rewarding moment. And it's and the second is really the birth. That is something extremely special. When you have the surrogate and the parents in the room and they go through that miracle of a birth, and they are connected to people who would have otherwise never known each other and would have nothing to do with each other, come together under this miracle of a birth and share that moment together. There is no dry eye in the house, including mine. And that is really the most amazing moment. And everyone who has worked for us at EDSI and everyone who has gone through this process, I think that is the moment, the first time that you experience this, it stays with you for the rest of your life.
Do the surrogates and the intended parents stay in touch or not really?
It really, people go into these relationships, into these endeavors, kind of having a sense of what they want. So, for example, we get some intended parents who say, you know what, I want to be involved. I want to go to the appointments. I want to have a relationship with the surrogate. And some say, you know what, we don't want to have a close relationship. We just, surrogate will do what she's doing. Give us updates every now and then. We'll be there. We'll, for the birth of the baby, then we'll take our child. But it's amazing how human relations and human factors always evolve the way they do. So quite often you see the ones who really didn't want very close relationships, they end up being best of friends. And really the surrogate becomes like another member of the family. They join them in birthday parties or in celebrations, and they just become an extended part of their family. And on the other hand, you see some where maybe they went in expecting close relationships and nothing happened. And after the birth, they, of course, they're extremely grateful for the gift that they're getting and everything. But then the relationship just doesn't evolve beyond that. And it might be once a month, then once a year, and then, whatever happens. So it really, human relationship, we can never control. And everybody has, different way of connecting with someone.
Yeah.
We've seen it all.
So for people listening, if somebody's listening and they're thinking, hey, I might be interested in becoming a surrogate, what would be a couple pieces of advice that you would give to them if that's something that they're considering doing?
Of course. I mean, the first thing is really do your homework. Ask a lot of questions. Contact us. I'll be more than happy to be a resource to answer any questions you have. Ask as many questions, whatever concern or question you have, no matter how basic you think it is. Or one of the people always, the first thing they say, well, this might sound like a dumb question, but, and I always tell them there is no such a thing, because if it is a question, it's a question and it needs to be answered. And so we need to, get educated, get your questions answered, and find out whether this emotional journey, physical journey, medical journey is right for you and for your family. And if it is, then know that there are professionals that can guide you through this and to help you through this. We will be more than happy to be a resource to help you, guide you through the right way, and to find out exactly what you're looking for. The matching process itself is very involved. It's not just any woman who wants to be a surrogate, any intended parents who want to have a child, that it's a great match. When we talk about issues of abortion, reduction, genetic abnormalities, singleton, twins, whether they will do one embryo transfer, two embryo transfer, really one of the biggest factors that we are looking at is the COVID vaccine, because there are, some intended parents who want their surrogate to absolutely be vaccinated. Some say absolutely not. We also have surrogates who want to get vaccinated or have been vaccinated, and some who refuse because they believe that that the vaccine is not safe. So these are all the things that go into creating that good match between the intended parents and the surrogate, so that ultimately it's the right journey for everyone. So this is why it's very important to be working with a good agency that can navigate all of these things with you.
Mm-hmm. So I used to always think that I could be a surrogate, but I don't think I could ever do it.
And that's very important, and kudos to you for really recognizing that, because it is not right for everyone. Mm-hmm. It really isn't. And the fact that you say, I couldn't do it, tells me that you shouldn't do it.
Right. And I actually loved being pregnant. My pregnancy was amazing. I had a great experience. I had like nausea for a few days, but I never threw up. I felt great. I can't wait to be pregnant again. We're going to, start trying to have babies again soon. But so I feel like I could get pregnant and like have someone else's baby, but all of the like, I don't do well with like shots. I don't do well with like, just like things that aren't necessarily in my control, I could not do. So I feel like, I couldn't do it because if they made a decision I didn't agree with, it'd be really hard for me to be on board with that. But you wouldn't have a choice because it's not your kid.
100%. And that's the thing, the temperament of the surrogate to me is one of the most important things because it is a medical procedure. The surrogate can't just wake up and say, oh, you know what, today I'm too tired. I don't want to do the shot because that throws away the entire process. So much financial commitment and monies that have been spent go down the drain. So it is, it is a medical process. It's a legal process. It's an emotional process, all wrapped in one. So that's why it really takes a very, very special human being to be able to recognize all these aspects and really follow through with becoming a surrogate and then actually being a surrogate. Mm-hmm. So those are two different things. And, once you decide to become one, that's one step. But then to actually be one and go through the entire process, that's another.
Yeah. Wow. You're right. That has to be somebody very special.
100%. And I think your dog agrees too.
I know. He just started barking. So for people listening, where can they connect with you? Where can they find you? Let's say they want to use your institute. Where's the best way for them to find you at?
Absolutely. The name is Egg Donor and Surrogacy Institute. Our website address is eggdonorandsurrogacy.com. Our Instagram handle is at eggdonorandsurrogacy. I'm also always a phone call away. My phone number is 310-697-8775. And I'll be more than happy to be a resource.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for giving out that information. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us everything that you do and the whole process. I feel like I definitely learned. I learned I can't be a surrogate today. So I definitely learned something. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. This was very fun.
Such an interesting interview. I feel like I did learn a lot about egg donor and surrogacy. It is more than just being like, hey, I think I'm going to donate my eggs or become a surrogate. There's so much that goes into it. I am sitting here now with Jovi. Hi, Jovi. And Hutch. Yeah, somebody didn't nap as long as she normally does in the morning. So she is here with me. And poopy, very poopy. So I got to go change this diaper. But if you're listening, make sure again that you are subscribed, that you are staying up to date with everything. Follow us on the Miraculous Mamas Instagram. Join our Facebook group. It's an awesome group of women who I feel like I've just found so much support there in my motherhood journey. So it's just a great community to be a part of. And yeah, make sure that you are sharing with your friends, with your family, and look out for the bonus episode this month. And we have great content coming out in August. Can't wait. Bye.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.